Conan the Barbarian has had many influential artists define his image over the years. From beautiful works of art from artists like John Buscema, Barry Windsor Smith, De La Torre, there are countless pieces for us to marvel at. But one artist in particular stands out as being more important to the image of Conan than all of the rest. And that is, of course, Frank Frazetta. While Robert E. Howard created the character for his short stories that were featured in Weird Tales magazine back in the 1930s, Frank Frazetta brought the character to life visually with his beautiful oil paintings. The first Conan piece that he did happens to be probably the most iconic even to this day, and that was the cover for Conan the Adventurer, the novelization done by Lancer Books by Elsbrag de Camp. Now, don't get it twisted. These are largely stories from Robert E. Howard that Elsbrag de Camp sort of hijacked and edited and added things to and really created this impure version of Howard's work. Despite the changes made by de Camp, these novelizations still happen to be extremely important to Conan, as these are the ultimate and pinnacle visual depiction of Conan the Barbarian done by Frank Frazetta. While we're on the topic of Robert E. Howard, though, I do want to just put a little thing out there into the ether. The Robert E. Howard Foundation is trying to restore Robert E. Howard's house, which is down in Cross Plains, Texas. I have not yet had the opportunity to go and see the house. I would love to do that someday. But they also do things down there such as Robert E. Howard Days, where it's a little festival and celebration of Robert E. Howard and just lots of cool things. You can go to their website and see some of this stuff. But in order to do the restoration, they are asking for donations from people. And I've had several people in the comments ask if I'd heard about this. As a result, I went and did some research and tried to make a donation on there, but I'm not sure if it went through yet or not because it was showing an error and I haven't gotten a charge yet. So I'll be checking that again later today to see if it's gone through. If not, I'm going to try to do it again. If any of you guys have been to the Robert E. Howard house or you want to visit it someday, I would encourage you to donate a little bit of money. It seems like you can just donate whatever amount you want. It doesn't need to be anything crazy, but if it's something that you desire to go and see sometime, it would be worthwhile to donate some money to ensure that it lasts a long time and it's still there for us that haven't seen it yet to be able to go and see it. All right, now look, guys, on the topic of Frank Frazetta's depiction of Conan. Now, Frank himself said that he did not depict the character of Conan that Robert E. Howard came up with. He depicted rather what he thought Conan should look like, what he thought to be this ultimate form of this barbarian character. But I don't really think that matters anymore because it has been cemented into the very fabric of the character of Conan the Barbarian to the point where now Frank Frazetta's artwork is almost as important to the image of Conan as Robert E. Howard's own writing. When I read the Robert E. Howard stories, I picture Frank Frazetta's character, and largely this is because I saw Frank Frazetta's character long before I ever read a Robert E. Howard story. Now, I'm not entirely sure what I would have imagined had I not seen Frank Frazetta's art in the first place or any of the comics or anything that came later, but I'm glad that I did see it because I can't imagine my own imagination would have come up with something as impressive and awesome as Frank Frazetta's depiction of Conan. For many people, this was the introduction to Conan for them, especially the older generation when they would go into bookstores and see the Lancer novels on the shelves with Frank Frazetta's art. For a lot of people, that was their first introduction to Conan. For others, the first introduction were things like the comics that came from several different comic publishers over the years, or the movies that have come out, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies or the Jason Momoa movie. But all of these later adaptations visually were inspired by Frank Frazetta. You see the resemblance in John Buscema's art and Barry Windsor Smith's art to Frank Frazetta Frazetta's Conan. And John Milius, who directed the 1982 Conan film with Arnold Schwarzenegger, even stated himself how inspired he was by Frank Frazetta's art and how he tried to visually recreate those pieces of art in the shots of the film. The director of the 2011 movie went on to say something similar. And even Jason Momoa, who played Conan in the 2011 movie, talks about how he was exposed to Frank Frazetta's Conan pieces at an early age. My first exposure to Frank Frazetta comes in the form of a large painting that I saw back in another life when I was in the military. I was stationed in South Korea, and like I said, this was another life because this was a point in my life where I actually drank alcohol, which I do not do anymore. My friends and I used to hang out at this bar in Pyeongtaek, South Korea, and it was a really cool little bar called the Bald Eagle where you would go underground, and then it was just this little single room with a pool table and big speakers and tons of records everywhere, and these beautiful works of art on the walls. One of them was a Frank Frazetta piece. Now, I am almost positive that this was not an original. However, it was huge and it looked like a painting. So it must have been some sort of a recreation, but it was very good. It looked awesome. If it was printed, it was printed very well. I mean, it was incredible. And I had never seen art like this before. I was blown away. And I just sat there like listening to heavy metal music, staring at this painting like I was being transported to another world. Another one of the soldiers, one of my friends, he told me that was Frank Frazetta. And this friend of mine, he had spent time in art school before being in the military and was a painter himself. So I got a whole lesson on Frank Frazetta and who he was and all of this awesome stuff. And then I remember going to the PX, which for like civilians, it's basically like a super Walmart or sometimes like a mall, but on military basis. And funny enough, in the PX, they have a little section of books, which are all like, books that make sense for soldiers to read, things like The Art of War and other things as well. Oddly enough, among these, they would have a lot of science fiction novels by L. Ron Hubbard. Crazy, the guy that started Scientology. One of these was called Battlefield Earth. And I instantly recognized the style of the painting that was on the cover of the book and just knew that was a Frank Frazetta piece, which it was. I bought it, not knowing anything about L. Ron Hubbard, really, other than that he started this weird religion called Scientology. That took me down a whole rabbit hole of learning about Scientology and all this crazy stuff, but that's another topic. Later on, I started getting into Conan, and it was just something that I had to do was get the Lancer novels. Now, there's a lot of controversy about these because of the heavy edits and the tight grip that DeCamp held on the rights to Conan and all this stuff, but we cannot deny how beautiful the covers of these novels are and how important these covers are to the image of Conan. These were all thanks to Frank Frazetta. Now, Frank Frazetta's art prominently features, most of the time, pretty close to, if not completely nude women, and in the case of some of these fantasy novels, men. But these figures are done in a way that is just so pleasing to the eye, like the pinnacle of humanity before your eyes, with the muscular, intimidating, awesome-looking men and the curvy, beautiful women. You can't help but fall in love with these works of art when you see them. I watched a documentary, which you can find for free. I think it's on YouTube and on Tubi. It's called Frazetta Painting with Fire, and it talks a lot about how Frank Frazetta was a huge athlete, like really loved baseball, and even was being scouted by baseball teams and stuff to maybe go and play for them. But they talk about how his knowledge of anatomy and muscles and how things work probably had a lot to do with his own personal athleticism and just an innate understanding of how the human body functions. This really shows through in his pieces as you see these characters in dynamic action poses with muscles rippling and moving in a way that seems anatomically correct. Now, as I stated, every depiction of Conan that has come after Frank Frazetta was influenced by Frank Frazetta. Prior to this, if you were to go back to the Weird Tales magazines that had Conan stories featured on the cover, the depictions of Conan were completely different and didn't even fit the vibe and aesthetic of the setting of the Hyborian Age or the character of Conan or anything. Frank Frazetta really brought this to life in his paintings by creating this mythical, fantastic world and this intimidating, impressive-looking barbarian character. And this really went on to define what Conan looks like. When we think of Conan the Barbarian, we do not think of the old Weird Tales covers. We think of this. This is Conan. And clearly, I'm not the only one, because all of the people who have gone on to do Conan comics and movies and everything later seem to think the same thing. We have similar works of art done by different artists, whether it's the Dark Horse comics or Titan comics or Marvel, that really try to capture that character that Frank Frazetta honestly created in his mind. Because, like he said, even his own depiction was different than Robert E. Howard's, but I think it fits so perfectly. If he made some little adjustments like long hair and things like this, I don't think that's that big of a departure from Robert E. Howard's stories. And again, if you read the original Robert E. Howard stories, picturing it as Frank Frazetta's Conan works perfectly. Now, Conan the Adventurer, that one that I showed from the Lancer novels, is the first piece that Frank Frazetta did for Conan, but he went on to do several others for some of the other Lancer novels as well. He did not do every one of them. In fact, I believe Conan of the Isles is done by a different artist. I'm looking through here to try and find who did the cover, and I don't see it anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't bother to credit the artist, to be honest. But he did the important ones. He did the Conan novel. He did Conan the Adventurer, Conan the Buccaneer, Conan the Conqueror, Conan the Avenger, Conan the Usurper. He really did a lot of them, and I just can't state enough how important this was. Like I said earlier, John Milius, who did the 1982 movie, he talks about how he was more inspired by Frank Frazetta's art than he was Robert E. Howard's own stories. And this is a little bit sad to hear, because Robert E. Howard's stories were just incredible. And when you watch the movie, you can see that it's not entirely faithful. It's not very faithful at all to Robert E. Howard's stories, honestly. It does get some of the overall feel and vibe right, but mostly it's faithful to Frank Frazetta rather than Robert E. Howard. Although Robert E. Howard created the character Conan the Barbarian, I do believe Frank Frazetta should be credited and is responsible for creating the image of Conan the Barbarian. He is almost as important to Conan as Robert E. Howard himself. That's what I've got for the video today, guys, but I got to do a shout out to my patrons. Now, if any of you want shout outs in these videos, you can subscribe to my Patreon. It's $3 a month. You'll get access to my comic series Hollow Points, to short stories that I write, as well as shout outs in these videos. Big thank you to my Patreons, Austin Brown, Aaron, Nate, and now I have some additional patrons thanks to my channel getting a ton more subscribers and starting to blow up. Thank you guys so much for that. So thank you. Big thank you to James Mills and Frog Morton, the newest patrons on my Patreon. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoy the comic series. Feel free to message me on there or anything if you want to ask questions or whatever it may be. I really appreciate the support. By the way, guys, my patron James Mills has a YouTube channel of his own. Just search James D. Mills. He's got some excellent videos on fantasy writing and sword and sorcery, and he's got some really cool ideas for independent authors and how to do some interesting things with publishing and putting out your own books. So definitely head on over there and check out his channel. And aside from that, guys, buy Crom, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you're a fan of Conan, and I'll see you in the next video.